I am ordering a reduction of the federal bureaucracy by at least 100,000 positions over the next 4 years. At least 10% of these cuts must come from senior management. These cuts will make our government more efficient and more effective. The government is full of dedicated people whose hard work is being choked off by our own bureaucracy. Second, I'm ordering each federal department and agency to reduce its administrative as opposed to its program cost by 12% over the next 4 years. With better planning and innovation, we can make better use of the money we already have. In many agencies, overhead is too high, red tape is too thick, and the day-to-day operations of the agencies have not been re-examined in a very long time. I am today ordering the elimination of hundreds of unproductive and duplicative advisory commissions that have spread across this government like kudzu. I'm asking the Office of Management and Budget to eliminate at least 1/3 of the 700 advisory boards and commissions that were not created by Congress. From now on, agencies and departments will not be allowed to create new commissions without permissions from OMB. We simply cannot allow the federal bureaucracy to beget more bureaucracy. We have run a horrendous government deficit. The deficit is now 4 times as big as it was in 1980. We have seen spending go up in areas that the government would have to move to control, mostly health care, and then interest on the debt, because when the deficit gets bigger and bigger and bigger, you spend more money on the debt. So we have reduced investment, increased the debt, moved money upward so that there's been much more inequality of income distribution. We must reduce the government's debt. Why? Why? Because if the debt gets bigger and bigger and bigger, 2 bad things happen. Bad thing number 1 is that Congress spends more of your tax money every year paying interest on the debt than investing in your future. It's now up to 15 cents on the dollar. If we do not change present spending patterns, when you hear people oppose the program I outlined, ask them what the cost of the status quo is. If we behave for 4 years, if we behave for 4 more years like we have for the last 12, here's what will happen. By the end of the decade, the deficit will be $650 billion a year, and we'll be spending about 22 cents of every one of your tax dollars just paying interest on the debt. First thing we have to do, and I mean the first, is to cut inessential government spending. I've been president 4 weeks. And I've been president 4 weeks, and I've found things that I wouldn't have believed. The White House, when I became president, was running on Jimmy Carter's telephone system and Lyndon Johnson's switchboard. In this high wage, this high technology era, with a procurement system that would have broken Einstein's brain. There are a lot of things that needed to be changed in the federal government. Second reason, even more important, is the more money the government borrows every year, the less money there is for people to borrow in the private sector, and the higher the cost of the money is. Just since the election, since we made it clear that there was going to be a determined effort to lower the deficit, interest rates long-term have dropped considerably. I'll come back to this in a moment. But if you think about it, this year, if we pass this budget, everybody in America who borrows long-term to finance a business, to finance a car, to finance a home, to finance credit card purchases, everybody that has access to variable interest rates will have those interest rates go down, and in my judgment, virtually everybody who has credit will save more money in lower interest costs than they will pay in higher taxes. Now that's very, very important. Now, how are we going to do this?
This report tells us how to cut waste, cut red tape, streamline the bureaucracy, change procurement rules, change the personnel rules, and create a government that works better and costs less. We still have a government that writes 10 pages of regulations on how to make an ashtray. We have a government that for the last 12 years has managed to spend $4 for every $3 that it takes in. That personnel code on those truck lift pallets behind us, We hire 40,000 people just to enforce that personnel code. It's the kind of unnecessary red tape that means somebody who calls the IRS with a question gets put on hold forever, or a small business owner has to spend hours and hours filling out a completely useless form, or a division head buys equipment he doesn't need because it's the end of the budget year. It's old-fashioned, outdated government. It's government using a quill pen in the age of word perfect.
The Reinventing Government, or RIGO, report aims to save $108 billion over 5 years through eliminating scores of wasteful programs and regulations. Among the 800 recommendations, eliminating 12% of the federal workforce, merging some government agencies like the FBI, the DEA, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, closing hundreds of government offices outside Washington.
I'm proud to announce some more good news today. At the General Services Administration, Administrator Johnson saved $1.2 billion by carefully reviewing construction projects that had been approved and not yet built. In other words, buildings we really didn't need. And just today, the GSA is announcing it saved $23 million simply by managing the government's motor pools more efficiently. Today, the Secretary of Defense set a goal to cut in half the time it takes to complete internal business processes from hiring workers to building new weapon systems. This is very important. Senator Glenn has worked for years on procurement reform. If we are going to maintain the national security at a time when we have to impose budget discipline, we must find ways to make these dollars go further. We can't simply abandon our technological lead, our readiness, our preparedness, all the things that have been so carefully built up over the last 16 or 17 years. At the Office of Management and Budget, Director-designate Rivlin tells me the federal government will offer buyouts to another 40,000 employees at the beginning of the new fiscal year next month. I am more convinced now than ever that we have to keep doing this, that we have to make this reinventing government a permanent process, and that there are serious structural issues which still have to be addressed. Washington needs to work for ordinary middle-class Americans, and in order to do that, we have got to find a way to open this process up so that the public interest can always overwhelm particular interest in matters of great importance. Our administration has just completed a review in which we have identified $24 billion in cuts in bureaucracy, red tape, and outmoded programs to help to do this. And we are committed to continuing the freeze on discretionary spending, which will save another $52 billion in the next 5-year budget cycle. We will do even more to shrink yesterday's government. I have called on the Vice President to review every single government program and department for further possible reductions. He's also going to review the federal regulatory process, and we have spent a good deal of time on that already, so that we can get better results for the public with less interference in their lives. Behind me, you can see in black and white the 400 programs that this budget will eliminate or consolidate. The terminations of about 130 programs here, and over here, the consolidation of 270 more. Those 271 programs will be distilled down into 27. We are also restructuring 5 major agencies as a part of the second round of reinventing government, the Vice President will discuss in a moment, to save $23 billion.
Significant streamlining in a number of agencies that have cut headquarters and obsolete field offices. For example, the Customs Service is cutting its headquarters by 1/3 and abolishing 7 regional offices. The Agriculture Department is cutting over 1,200 field offices. The Interior Department will cut its headquarters staff by nearly 50% as part of its overall restructuring. And the Labor Department will close many regional and field offices as it streamlines for the 21st century. We plan to continue our efforts to improve how government works and add a second focus by asking, what should government be doing? The second phase of the performance review has 3 elements. It is examining every agency and program with an eye toward whether they should continue to exist, and if they can be privatized or consolidated, or if they can be streamlined significantly so they can provide better service at lower costs. For example, this budget proposes to terminate the Interstate Commerce Commission, cancel highway demonstration projects, privatize portions of the National Weather Service, privatize the helium program, rely on the private sector for NASA communication with spacecraft, expand lease authority in our national parks so they're run in a more entrepreneurial way, and privatize the Naval Petroleum Reserve. Several agencies such as HUD, Transportation, and Energy have radically restructured their operations. At HUD, 60 programs have been collapsed into 3 flexible performance-based funds. At the Department of Energy, significant efficiencies have been outlined in the areas of nuclear waste cleanup and management. And at the Department of Transportation, the old rigid structure based on modes of transportation has been replaced by a more modern and efficient organization.
Today, the federal workforce is 200,000 employees smaller than it was the day I took office as president. Our federal government today is the smallest it has been in 30 years, and it's getting smaller every day. We know big government does not have all the answers. We know there's not a program for every problem. We know, and we have worked to give the American people a smaller, less bureaucratic government in Washington. And we have to give the American people one that lives within its means. The era of big government is over.